Hi everyone and welcome to the Financial Fox. I hope that you're all keeping well and staying safe, lockdown or not. We are kind of still in a lockdown mood, let's say here in London, but things are changing and countries are opening up, which is good. So today I want to dive into some serious stuff about where the economy is going, particularly because I have the eminent Charles Hoskinson with me today. He's the co-founder of Ethereum, founder and CEO of Input and Output Hong Kong, and he is the mind behind Cardano, one of the top cryptocurrencies in the world. A visionary with a mission to reinvent society. Hi Charles, it's a pleasure to have you back on the show. How are you keeping?
Very well here in warm, sunny Colorado. The quarantines are gradually receding and the weather's great. And soon the restaurants will be open again. So I finally get something to eat.
So no lockdown, basically, where you are?
We've been under lockdown for about 60 days, and the governor's lifting the lockdown on the 26th.
Okay, so that's good. But I think you were used to traveling a lot. Now this pandemic kind of stuck you home, let's say. How that has affected your work? I mean, what have you been doing in the past few months?
Well, that's an interesting question. So March is when really this started affecting the whole world and lockdowns began. And in the month of March, I was actually scheduled to go to South Africa, to Tanzania, to Uganda, Rwanda, Ethiopia. I was meeting several heads of state. We were going to do a lot of business, and that was just the month of March. And then April, I was going to do something in Dubai. Normally, I travel about 200 to 250 days a year. So it's been very different going back to not traveling at all. It reminds me when I was younger, when I was just in one place. So I've been catching up on a lot of farming and ranching, and I built some raised beds and started to do some hydroponic growing of flowers and things like that. So you always get to play around with the home hobbies. As for the business itself, we're running just fine. We're a remote company. All our workers work at home. So when people started saying, hey, you have to work at home, we said, well, nothing has changed for us. We're used to this. We have about 240 people in 40 countries. And what's nice is every day I kind of get a cross section of what's going on in the world. We have people in Japan and Croatia and India and England and Argentina and so forth. And so I get a good sense of who's having a hard time, who's not. But overall productivity is up. We've been shipping product faster than we ever have before. We have to work a little differently because one of the things we used to do to align everybody was have product workshops. So whatever team was working on something, we'd all meet in one place for a week. We'd socialize a little bit and then get to work and have a lot of in-person meetings. And we can't do that right now. So it's slowed certain things down, but not in any meaningful way to stop the product development.
Yeah, well, in one of your tweets at the end of February, when basically the impact of the virus has started to take hold, you made some pretty gloomy forecast about how it would impact economy and governments, and the digital sphere will be the most resilient. Where did this outlook stem from, and what do you see as the endemic flows in the current government and economic systems?
So the world is one gigantic interconnected ball. You can't untangle one part of it without impacting another part of it. So it's that old saying, if a butterfly flaps its wings in America, then it creates a tsunami in Japan. So there's this cascading disruption that occurs in an economy when a big event occurs, like a war or a pandemic. And that has a bit of latency about it. And we're just starting to feel that. So if you shut down all your supply chains, your restaurants, your entertainment industry, if you start saying elective procedures are no longer allowed to be performed at hospitals, then what ends up happening is you're furloughing a very sizable chunk of your economy. Then they can't pay their rent. Then the landlords are in trouble. Then you have a credit crisis that occurs. And of course, consumer consumption crunches up everywhere. People stop buying cars. Obviously, there's no vacations right now. So all the hotels get hurt. All the travel industry gets hurt. And then the people working in those industries no longer have disposable income. So they stop buying things. So the luxury goods market falls apart. And then those people suffer. So you have this like wave of things that occur until eventually you push the economy into a depression. So as early as February, when it became clear that at least some economies were going to go into total lockdown, like Italy, for example, then eventually America and other places, it was very, very clear to me that this was going to have a substantial impact on SMEs, and it was going to have a substantial impact on the middle class and the poor. What's really strange, though, is there's this counter-cyclic push where the stock market is gaining value. And the principal reason for that is because central banks are just mass printing money and dumping it into the economy. So basically the large companies are getting a bailout, and this is why their stocks are doing quite well, and especially tech companies, because they also have the huge surge of people staying at home consuming their services. So Netflix and Google, they do pretty well in these types of things. But Main Street and small businesses are just devastated. New York City has about 20,000 restaurants. About 10,000 of them are going to go out of business, if not more, as a direct result of this. Most of those are small businesses. The agricultural sector in the United States is just devastated as well. They've told farmers just to butcher their cattle, their sheep, their pigs, and they get very little money for this, and it doesn't even enter the food supply chain. So it's an asymmetrical depression where the rich are doing quite well and large businesses are doing quite well, and will end up making a large profit from this. And there's going to be a lot of consolidation from this. But the small businesses are devastated as a consequence of these lockdowns. It's extremely harsh on them.
I mean, but how long we can go ahead with kind of this situation, because the Fed has expanded its balance sheet and the borrowing is increasing. There is in the emerging market, there is also big crisis. We see in Brazil, Turkey, Argentina, and Venezuela. And, also Europe has expanded, European countries has expanded their government deficit by 20-25% in just a month. I mean, this is something that is unsustainable. So right. That makes us thinking, right? So this event is so disruptive that is actually gonna change completely or introduce some big changes within the economy and society, and probably some of the traditional institutions, they are going to fall, or they have to completely reshuffle, because it's unsustainable, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good point. And there's already evidence of countries like Argentina, for example, perhaps going to a default and perhaps an economic collapse. And this is early days. The real impact of these shutdowns will not be felt for another 6 to 9 months. What governments can do in the short term is basically print huge sums of money and provide direct subsidy, but you can't fix a broken economy by printing money. We tried to do that during the Great Depression. There's a great book to read on this. It's called FDR's Folly, where an economist rigorously went through most of the New Deal policy that was pushed upon the world during the Great Depression by FDR, and demonstrating again and again and again that the National Recovery Administration and these other massive government spending programs in the 1930s were not effective by any sense of the word. We kept being pushed back into recession. The unemployment rate kept staying above double digits. So you really can't, just through the power of socialism and money printing, somehow get your way out of a depression. It just does not work. When you create money out of thin air, you haven't created anything new. You haven't created any productivity. You haven't created a new product. There's nothing real about that. It's just numbers on a spreadsheet. And because people have faith and trust in it, they'll believe that money for a short period of time. But then over time, they lose faith and credibility in it. And then what ends up happening is it actually is a wealth transfer, not to the poor, but to the wealthy, because the wealthy get first access to that valuable money, and then they can use it to diversify, whereas the poor get the table scraps and their buying power goes down further and further. In fact, if you take a look at charts since 1971, when we went off the gold standard, there's a situation where the wealthiest did very, very well. In fact, we saw colossal gains in wealth, but the middle class and the poor, they, when you adjust for inflation, did not really get a substantial pay increase. In many cases, their buying power is actually less than it was in 1971. And this is a direct result of the debasement of the currency. They make more money. They'll make $60,000 or $70,000 a year, but $60,000 or $70,000 today buys significantly less than $20,000, $30,000 in 1971, because of the way that the money is decayed and deteriorated. So no, this can't last forever. And the longer we do this, the more harm we're going to do to the global economy. And it's going to have very dark implications to the world, especially the developing world. In fact, the New York Times ran an article in April that the United Nations is estimating that 265 million people, as a direct result of the coronavirus lockdowns, are going to be pushed into acute hunger. And about 1 to 2% of them will probably starve to death. So that's about 2.6 million to 5 million people worldwide. Places like India, Indonesia, all throughout Africa will literally die of starvation because of this economic calamity. And that's very predictable. If you look at all the economic crises of the past, it's always happened, from the original Spanish flu to World War I, World War II. You look at the disastrous economic policy of China and the Soviet Union during the reign of Mao and Stalin. 100 million people died of starvation in those economies because of poor central planning. So whenever you shut the economy down and you tinker with the free market in this pervasive of a way, the consequences have some latency, but they certainly are felt, and they're long term. They take years, if not decades, to fully correct.
Yeah, and you mentioned some really big number. I mean, this is where actually the rise of cryptocurrency is coming to kind of rescue. And we kind of see the price of Bitcoin, not just because of the halving, but as being kind of rising, as sustaining some really good prices, kind of like a safe haven asset, let's say,
Right.
but also as an alternative asset. Do you see Bitcoin to be the cryptocurrency of the future, or do you see it to be a reserve currency and other cryptocurrency are going to be the one that can be used for exchange?
Yeah, when you're reinventing money, you have to go on a journey. You know, the first monies were commodity monies, and then we went to gold, and then we said, hey, we're going to create fiat currencies that are kind of backed by gold, partially or completely, and then we decoupled the gold component, went to full paper. So that's basically what's happening in the cryptocurrency space, is that we've invented a digital commodity, Bitcoin. It's clearly not a dollar, it's not money in the respect that it has predictable value, but it's a lot like gold, and it tends to hold its value over time. So it's a pretty good store of value. So the existence of an asset like this gives you the dimension of freedom that you need to start monetary innovation and start exploring creating stable coins and all kinds of financial products, which could become dollar replacements. And we've already seen a lot of projects explore this, like Saga and MakerDAO and these types of things. And so more innovation will occur over the next 5 or 10 years. And really, for money to be useful, not only does it have to have predictable value, but that predictable value is necessary for the thing that's even more useful, which is credit. This is the miracle of modern economics and banking, is this idea that you can give poor people or middle-class people a large amount of money to go invest in something, a home, a car, education. They can build themselves up with that investment and gradually pay you back over time with profit. Old economies couldn't do this, and so you basically had only two classes, the poor and the rich, a very small group of wealthy people and just all poor. You know, debt and credit is a difficult thing in practice to institutionalize, and it requires stable money because you need to be paid back in something with predictable value over time. So unless cryptocurrencies can enable an alternative credit system to the current banking system, they never will displace it. But we are making enough monetary innovation that there's a very good reality where I think within 5 to 10 years, we will have a legitimate stable coin and be able to really get good stability in our ecosystem. And we've already seen a lot of experiments like with Nexo and I believe it's Celsius for things like peer-to-peer lending. So we're getting all that foundational stuff in place. And over the next 5, 10 years, as we navigate our way through this severe recession or depression, there's going to be a lot of appetite and hunger for alternative financial systems, especially in places where the government no longer maintains any legitimacy or credibility. This will happen in Argentina and all throughout Africa, because the money is going to be worthless. Any promise the government makes is not going to be worth anything. So the people there have two options. You can either go to the dollar, which they historically have done, or they can try something else. The disadvantage of the dollar is that you can criminalize it. So that's the first thing despots do. They put capital controls in place and they make it illegal to possess foreign currencies. So there's going to be a big push, I think, in the developing world, not only towards crypto, but private crypto, where it's difficult to prove you own it, primarily because they don't want the government to seize it, but they need to hold on to it to preserve what little wealth they have.
Yeah, I think that you just hit the point that I wanted to mention, because the emerging market, they more likely with the pandemic, they are going to go into a deep, bigger debt. And,
Right.
if crypto can help to shuffle the system, that is basically all the game. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about the development that Cardano has been doing, particularly with the Shelley Friends and Family testnet network. How is that going?
Yeah, this has been so much fun. This is like the good part of the job. I ate my broccoli, and so now I get to have some cake, and we're on the cake phase. So anyway, we started last year in December with the incentivized testnet, and that was with our Rust code base. And the point of the incentivized testnet was just to build up a large population of stake pool operators and get a sense of who's legitimate, who's not, who's really technical and serious and wants to run a stake pool business, and who's just dabbling. And we got great participation there. About half of all of the ADA was staked, 1,200 stake pools registered, 300-400 were active, meaning they were making blocks regularly. And so we took a subset of that network and we launched the Pioneer testnet, also known as the Friends and Family testnet. And basically the point of this testnet was for us to start turning on Shelley for mainnet. So right now we have a series of 12 exercises. The Pioneers have gotten through 3 of them so far. Before the end of the month, they'll get through all 12, but every single one of those is a step-by-step guide to how to run a stake pool end-to-end on Shelley. And then those will eventually be turned into either videos on YouTube or Udemy course so that anybody can learn these things. But that Pioneer set also has a dual mandate. So it's not only just learn how to run the network and help us debug things, but also to teach the next wave of stake pool operators that come on in. So we're going to open the Pioneer network up to a public testnet for everybody, all the stake pool operators. And not only will we give support and help people get through and learn, but the Pioneers will as well. At that point, we're ready to go for Shelley from a consensus viewpoint, meaning that we have a group of people that are 100% ready on day one to start making blocks and run the network and make Cardano the most decentralized system. The other side is that we have to get everybody else, the ADA holders, everyday people, so non-stake pool people, and enterprise users like exchanges on board. So we have an effort underway with Adrestia, where we're updating all of our libraries, and we're working with Binance and others to help them get ready for basically the Shelley transition. And there's a lot of great work we're doing there. We completely rewrote the way for listing ADA. So we're using GraphQL and all this cool stuff. And we've had some great success there. And we're going to, next month, likely launch the balance check testnet. And the point of that is to basically give an end-to-end user experience for the everyday ADA user and verify that all the money that they made, the rewards that they made on the incentivized testnet, ported over properly. And the next step after that is just basically launching the mainnet client. And we'll burn it in for a few weeks and then hard fork. So we're basically on rails at this point. Everything is happening as we predicted. We haven't missed a single deadline in the last few weeks.
I think that is a very good point that is important to say, that Shelley is going to happen soon. Yeah. And it's not going to drag over and over, because I think sometimes people get worried that you're going to do something and then it's not going to be fulfilled.
And let's get on that point for a second, because it's a contentious one in the community, the Shelley delay, the Cardano issue. So the original estimates for launching Shelley were as far back as 2018, and that was a different notion of Shelley. So we always knew there was a long arc research for Cardano, and this is why we had a two-phased approach. One was, let's build something that can give people liquidity and test concepts of Shelley, and then let's do a lot of hard computer science research and then build the final product and deliver that final product in the 2020 timeframe. So the original firm that we worked with just did not have the skill sets necessary, unfortunately, to get us where we needed to go in 2018. And so I had to make a very difficult decision as a CEO, instead of having this parallel two-phase roadmap, to basically rewrite all the software. And we anticipated that that rewrite was going to be finished in 2019, but we were plagued with delays and we were plagued with personnel issues, and and just a lot of little things that came up. And also the fact that we had to maintain a high technical debt, old code base that wasn't fit for purpose, massively slowed us down. Literally adding a feature to that code base would take months. And there was just so much work that had to be done, remediate it to get to a point where it was sustainable. So in our attempt to be clever and optimistic, we ended up shooting ourselves in the foot back in 2018. And it was a very painful time. But now we're on the other side of it. I mean, we've completely rewritten Cardano from the ground up with an in-house team. We're based on a formal methods verified code base. And you know, the launch of the Byron reboot went without a hitch. We did, I think that month, 8 releases or 9 releases in the month of April. And this month we're releasing just as fast. We have more commit volume than any cryptocurrency project in the space. And those are very meaningful commits, and they're backed by tools like Quick Check, and they're backed by a deep QA pipeline. And we're on a 2-week release cycle. So it's just a world apart from where we were at. Unfortunately, people that understand software engineering, they can't differentiate those 2 eras. And people who just kind of are fair weather, or they come in and out every 6 months, they don't really know that this is a significantly different company time effort than it was even in 2019 or certainly 2018. So we've righted the ship, but you know, we have to, the proof is in the pudding. We have to ship the Shelley mainnet before people will start believing in the deadlines again, in the product again, and that's fine. You know, it's shame on us for not getting it done the first time around. But the product we're shipping is a very different one than would have been shipped in 2018. The protocols are different. Back then, it would have been Ouroboros Classic. Now it's Ouroboros Pros. We have completely different network design. We have significantly better ledger design. We have a polylithic instead of a monolithic architecture. We have a much shorter latency to Goguen. You know, we're going to be able to roll out Plutus very quickly after we launch Shelley. And we have a much stronger community today, a more realistic community today than we did back in 2018. So it's a different time, it's a different product. And what we're launching, I think, is going to be the best launch in the entire space this year. And it's going to be probably the most meaningful launch. And you can just tell by the state pool operators. Look at the Pioneer testnet videos that they're making. We told them, hey, you don't have to sign an NDA. You can say or do whatever you want. You can make any video, criticism, whatever. You're still a Pioneer. And all the videos are overwhelmingly positive. And they're showing running dozens of nodes with low CPU utilization, being able to network to lots of things. They're saying this is just different software from anyone else in the space. It does not feel like an alpha or a beta or an intermediate product. It feels like a highly polished product that's enterprise grade.
Yeah, and I think you are quite a perfectionist as well. So you want everything to be working fantastic
Right.
and perfectly. So I'm
Right.
sure that, you know, things are done at the best, and looking forward to that. But at the same time, there are lots of projects that you are doing. For example, I wanted to mention about the donation that Input and Out to Hong Kong made to the University of Wyoming Blockchain Research and Development Lab for real world blockchain use cases. That was quite a substantial amount of money, because it was $500,000. And
Yeah.
you know, what are you trying to achieve here with the lab?
Yeah, that's a great question too. And just to capstone that last conversation, you know, the frustration of my job is that I run a company with many products and projects, and most of our products and projects are on schedule. Nobody talks about them, like Prism or the University of Wyoming efforts or these other things. We had timelines and roadmaps, and all those things are hitting targets. And there's this one problem child, and then it kind of jades everything else. The other things, people tend to believe that because we work on many things, that these things tend to slow down the other things. And the reality is we're not set up that way. For example, we have a team that writes in Scala code. It has very limited interaction with the Cardano team. So the University of Wyoming is no different in that respect. It's a slightly independent effort, but it's an effort that brings synergistic value to our entire ecosystem. So what happened was we were working with New Balance, and we were working with Tangem. And we were frustrated by the fact that there wasn't a low-cost, open, trusted hardware module that we could just simply put into the shoe, and then we could use that as part of the authentication and anti-counterfeiting solution. So we said, well, it'd be really cool if we could find one on market. We looked around, we couldn't, because no one's built one that's useful and has all the features that we wanted. So we said it would be really cool if we could just build one ourselves then. So we started talking to a lot of different universities, and University of Wyoming in particular came up I love universities like this. Like our lab at University of Edinburgh was very similar in this respect. So when we set up our crypto lab at Edinburgh, it was the smallest cryptocurrency lab in the UK. It was one person. Now it's the largest and the highest publication count. It's got tons of graduate students, postdocs. It's got the highest citation count. It's just kicking everybody's ass. So we started from nothing and we built Blue Ocean, this huge research lab there. Similarly in Wyoming, they're pivoting from an agro school and a petroleum engineering school, coal school, to trying to embrace blockchain technology and other areas of emerging technology for the 21st century. So there's a lot of government subsidy, there's a lot of political interest, there's a lot of administrative interest in basically being our friend and building with us. So the real story here isn't just we gave $500,000 to a university, because first we gave $500,000 worth of ADA to a university and they accepted it as legal tender. But the state of Wyoming and the university matched it. So the total size of the endowment's $1.3 million. So we magically turned $500,000 to $1.3 million. It's called making a good deal. And then what we can use that pool of capital for is to, over time, start designing an open platform that is a secure hardware module specifically for all the crypto that's in our space. Signature generation, proof of secure erasure, things for stake pools, and a lot of things that would be very useful for product authentication. And we want to design this not only in an open source way, but also design it in a way that's very low cost to manufacture, sub $1 per chip. Okay, so what is the consumer experience of the end product? The idea would be that you have this tiny little chip, you can embed it in a purse, you can embed it in a shoe, whatever. You take your cell phone, you just tap it on the bag, you tap it on the shoe, the watch, whatever the luxury good is, and then the cell phone tells you if it's authentic or not. And there's enough security and magic and blockchain and crypto that's mixed into how we've built it that you have a high degree of certainty that that is accurate. It can't be forged by a third-party manufacturer in the supply chain or by a consumer doing aftermarket modifications. So that's the end goal of where we want to take it. And if you have a platform like that that's extremely powerful, you can build tons of great products. But what's nice about it is it's open. So it's going to be no patent-free hardware. It's going to be open source design, just like the Raspberry Pi or these types of things. And then you can build a federation of actors around that, whether it be hardware wallet manufacturers or people like Tangem or others who can come on in and use that platform, build on top of that platform. Now, the benefit to Cardano is we have a very deep solution that we're planning for product authentication for luxury goods and for all the markets that you can build once that place is in, especially secondary markets, once that's in place. So the fact that this chip exists allows us to offer something unique to all of these companies that they've really never seen before, but offer it at a very competitive price point. Yeah. So obviously, if we succeed in that, all that traffic will use Cardano as the blockchain backend for that. So this is a long arc play. We don't anticipate we'll see an actual prototype chip until at least 2021, maybe 2022. But within 3 to 5 years, that time horizon, we definitely could have something very substantial in market that we can just keep reusing for different product verticals. We can use it for identity chips and driver's licenses and passports. We can use it in supply chain management. We can put a bio package on it using cattle and sheep and other things.
Yeah, in food, I was thinking about all the, you know, the organic food and stuff like that. I think the food industry is also, it would be also interesting.
And what's nice about that is we grow as Wyoming does. And so we're going to still see state matching funds year after year in this lab. And then eventually we'll probably be able to get federal subsidies in this lab as well. So it offsets our R&D costs. And our hope is over time to build an alliance around this. So not just one company, but a collection of companies, whether they be Ledger or Tangem or whatever, who may find use in what we're doing. And then they can bring their unique commercial expertise. And then they also can use the output of it. And this will be versioned. So when we have the 1.0 of the chip, 24 months later, we'll have the 2.0, and it'll just keep going indefinitely. That's the long-term goal.
It is an amazing project. Now, talking a little bit about Africa before we wrap it up, there is a lot of interest going on there. We saw the Binance is kind of targeting the country now. How are your projects going there?
Oh, those are great. You know, Africa, they have this saying, Africa time. It means that sometimes things don't happen when you want them to happen, but eventually, if you stick around long enough, they do. Yeah. The key to doing business in Africa is building relationships, making people like you, and then just being in the right rooms long enough to eventually be able to open up contracts and opportunities. And so that what we found in the country of Ethiopia, which is our largest endeavor, is that time horizon is about 2 years. So we've been there for 2 years. We trained a lot of engineers. We worked with a lot of government pilots, and we've gotten to a point where we're now actually getting a large amount of deal flow, and we're bidding on the most attractive of that deal flow. The largest in particular is a voucher program for fertilizer for 6 million farmers for the Agricultural Transformation Agency. That's an example of a project that we look at, but there's dozens of them that are crossing our desk, and they're generally the same way. Globalism is coming, and it's fundamentally changing the way that people in Africa have to do business, and they're not quite prepared for it, so the systems have to be updated, and it's not optional, because if they don't update the systems, they lose market access. If you're Starbucks and you say things like, we're only going to buy fair trade coffee or sustainable coffee, well, that is not just a liberal environmentalist statement. That's actually a very serious commercial statement, because basically what's saying to the Ethiopian farmer is, unless you can prove certain things about your beans, you no longer can sell the largest coffee consumer in the world. And so, holy shit, we need to upgrade this, or else we lose market access and we make less money. So there's a huge scramble all throughout Ethiopia and all throughout Pan-Africa to upgrade systems, whether they be property systems, voter registration systems, supply chain systems. And that's a great opportunity for us as an industry, because all these systems are non-digital. Yeah. Okay, they live on paper. So it's not really like they're going from Microsoft to Oracle or Oracle to IBM. It's they're going from a 1950s paper system, some cases that came from the British, to a completely digital system. So they have no brand preferences. So you can propose a blockchain solution, and there's no barrier from an incumbency standard. And if we get in early, we can leapfrog the market, much like when Pakistan was pushing phones throughout their country. They had to make a decision. Do we do copper wire or do we do 4G towers? They skipped putting copper in the ground. They went straight to 4G. And so it's the same situation for us. We're basically making the argument that you can put in these holistic blockchain-based systems, and then you get everything. You don't just get a supply chain system that can prove things about your coffee. You also get an identity system for your farmers. You get a voter registration system for them. They can vote online all of a sudden. You get a property registration system. You get a credit system. You get a payment system. And all of that uses the same common infrastructure. So it's much more efficient, and it's transnational. So you have a lot of confidence and faith in the system, and there's no risk of sovereign problems where political changes in the country can somehow unwind the system. Once the system's set, it runs in a very transnational way.
Yeah, and transparent, and you have been there for quite a while, so you know how that works and you know how to deliver results. Are you considering to do any partnership with Binance probably in Africa?
Yeah, it's a great question too. So we run into them all the time, and they have a fund, and CZ's definitely made Africa a priority, and they've been trying to create liquidity in places. We've as exotic as Angola, we've heard things, Uganda and other places. And it's nice that they have a Pan-African view as well. This is no coincidence that China has a Pan-African view. They've put $1 trillion of investment into that continent over the last 10 years. So it's kind of foreign for us as people in the United States to say, oh, let's go build a big business in Africa. But if you are in the Chinese business sphere, it's actually pretty natural, because there's already a lot of infrastructure there. So it makes a lot of sense to try to move into those economies. So where and when it makes sense, we'll definitely try to coordinate, collaborate with them. And there's probably a lot of projects, especially in Central Africa and East Africa, which would make sense, but it's not quite the time for that. However, 2021 will probably be a good time, and we'll see what we can do. They're not the only venture there. There's also Stellar. We've run into them in Ethiopia through coffee track and tracing, and a few other projects here and there. And there's a small EOS community in Nigeria. So there's certainly some tentacles and roots that are maturing at different speeds. But I think we're the only company and the only project that has a true Pan-African view. Our director of African operations has been to nearly every country in Africa. We have community in more than 25 countries in Africa. And it's extremely cost effective for us to field hundreds of thousands of people in our community and have ambassadors and infrastructure through partners like ISADIS and so forth. So we have a very continental view, and we tend to look at things like, what would it take to build a Pan-African currency? There's been a discussion of, could Africa do what Europe did with the euro and actually have a universal currency they can trade amongst each other? Very high probability if that happens, it'll be a cryptocurrency. There's also been a lot of discussion about Pan-African regulatory standards as well. So the AU talks about this a lot, the African Union. So, they don't really like American KYC and AML. It's very cost inefficient, and there's no reason to implement a system like that if you're starting from scratch. It was a Frankenstein system. So they say, can we build a better compliance system that better grafts onto the needs of people in Africa and scales down to the poorest in Africa, but still is as good as the American system or better? So these transnational, these Pan-African conversations are where we really love being, because we get one deal and we could end up getting 800 million customers for that deal.
Yeah, and that gives you the opportunity to reinvent society, which is basically the main goal of Cardano and your mission.
Yeah.
So Charles, thank you so much. That was a great insight. And how is the farm going? How your animals, pets? I've got new pets now, look.
Oh, look, he's so cute.
Hello. He was sleeping.
I have 4 dogs, 2 small ones and 2 large ones on the farm, and I got a Pyrenees to stay up all night, keep the coyotes away, and the Anatolian Shepherd keeps the squirrels away during the daytime, and then the 2 small dogs are lap dogs. They just kind of sit in the lap all day.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, they're great. They're great. I have horses and goats and lots of animals, and they're all doing great. We're actually growing hay there too, and I'm getting just about ready for a cut. So that's nice because I don't have to pay to feed the horses. They can just eat the hay at the farm. But it's nice to have a farm in times of quarantine. Everybody's getting a bit stir crazy and cabin fever. But I have 50 acres, and I can just go outside and get lost on my own land. So it's nice to be in that situation. And also, I'm just outside of the city, but I'm not in a very rural area. I'm outside of Boulder. So it's only 30 minutes to an international airport, 35 minutes to Denver. So I'm not making any sacrifices. I have the country, beautiful mountain view and the farm animals, but then 5 minutes I'm in the town of Longmont, and 20 minutes I'm in the town of Boulder, and I could be eating at a Michelin star restaurant. So it's a unique lifestyle, I'll tell you that. And I feel very blessed to have it.
And also, I think it's kind of like your sustainable, having a farm, it makes you thinking about sustainability. And I think it's not just because it's cool and it's trendy now, but because it's a very important element to incorporate in any kind of business plan. And I think that is something that, you will always keep it in mind while you are developing your project about, sustainability, right, and how important it is.
Yeah, I grow things, and when you grow things, it takes months and months, and then you can do things to damage your soil, to damage your farm. So you can, burn your farm out pretty quickly if you're not clever about it. And that's a great analogy for sustainable protocol design and company design. There are things you can do to make huge profit in the short term for your company, and you can effectively raid your business model and your company and your customer, but is devastating to you in the long term. So if you think like a farmer, you tend to say, is this going to be fertile soil year after year? Are the decisions I'm making going to result in something that I can live on for the rest of my life? Or is this something that I can only live on for today? So I think it's a great life lesson to grow stuff. And just, even if you have a plant on your desk, you have to be accountable to that, and you have to water it, make sure it's around every day. It really changes your perspective on things.
Yeah. I agree. Anyway, Charles, thank you so much. And I hope to see you soon on the show with more news on Cardano and how things are going as well with your project.
We'd love to have you at the virtual summit. We're just about to announce that. So it'd be a lot of fun. If not, I'll definitely come back on. This has been so much fun.
So this is everything from the Financial Fox. It was a really good interview, obviously, as it is always with Charles, and lots of things actually for us to think about. So do subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you next time. In the meantime, stay safe.